Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is an NPC bodybuilder. Today's guest is Brandon Beckrich. Brandon, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks a lot for having me, man.
Yeah, for sure. So Brandon, I like to kind of start each podcast off by asking my guests the same two questions. So the first question I have for you is, who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders of all time?
I have two favorite bodybuilders, I would say. One for physique, and that's Kevin Levrone. That's kind of who I always emulated when I was getting into bodybuilding. I always thought that he had just the most ideal physique, right? Mass and symmetry, everything, right? The other one is Jay Cutler. I know Jay personally, but just the guidance that he gave me at a very young age and kind of gave my career, if you want to call it that, a jump start with, my first sponsorship with Muscle Tech and things like that. And just was always there, at shows and remember who I was. And I always admired his approach to the sport with business, obviously, and just how he interacted with fans and just made everybody feel like, they were somebody. So I would say those two.
Very cool. I want to ask you, because Jay Cutler is my favorite bodybuilder and he comes up almost every podcast, but how did you kind of first meet Jay? How did that happen? I'm kind of curious.
So I went to my first Arnold Classic in, 2000. I want to say it was like 2005. Still with Muscle Tech. That was, years before the recession. So you used to go there and have the big bulk nutrition bags, right? Have supplements for a year. But they had, gosh, who was it? They had Matt Duvall was still with Muscle Tech back then. A couple other guys. Chris Cook was around, not with Muscle Tech, obviously, but in that time. And Muscle Tech had this booth where you would walk by in the booth, you would take a picture with Jay, and you would walk through the line behind the desk, meeting all the pros. By the time you got to the end, they would have this picture printed out and signed by Jay, and in this like little nice cutout, right? It was badass. But I remember with the first interaction I had with him, I was just like, this guy is insanely large. And I was kind of starstruck a little bit, like, and he's like, you having a good time? And I was like, oh, oh, he talks. I was like, I am now. I'm like, wow, this is awesome. But then he had done, local guest posing, like I'm right outside Chicago. So he had always done like Chuck Sano shows over at the Indiana State guest post and everything like that. So I would always go and watch and everything. And obviously fanboy, right? Like get a picture. And I always made the joke when I would see him, I said, I got to compare my last local supplement store, and he's all sponsors. I go, well, I thought I did. I said no. So he gave me his phone number, and he says, give me a text tomorrow. And he's like, I'm flying out to Dubai. He's like, I'm going to get you in touch with Muscle Tech and, get you rolling. I was like, wow, no shit. So that was kind of how things rolled with Jay and I. And obviously me being in the industry for a long time, we've come across paths and everything and caught up and stuff. And not saying like we're close or friends or anything, but, he remembers me and remembers our history. So really cool guy.
Yeah. So you broke up there for a minute. So I just repeat for us. You said that you got the print off picture and then you kind of cut out. So just pick it up from there. I'm sorry.
Oh shit. Okay. So you would take a picture and then you would walk through all the pros or whatever. And at the end of the line, they would have the picture printed up for you in like a nice frame. So I was just saying that, when I met him and everything, I was a little starstruck, and he was like, you having a good time? And I was like, yeah, I am now. Like, this is awesome. But he had done, multiple guest posing appearances out here, and, through all their expos, I'd seen him over the years and stuff. So he had, like I said he recognized me one time, and he's like, I've met you before, and asked if I had sponsorship. I told him a local supplement store, and he's like, no, like a real sponsor. And long story short, he got me in touch with Muscle Tech, that weekend, and the rest was history. So I was with Muscle Tech for 2 years and got published, got a nice paycheck from them, and went to Allmax and stuff like that. So I would say that he, played a pivotal role in, the way my bodybuilding career started.
100%. Is there kind of like one piece of advice, or maybe just, maybe some words that he's spoken to you at some point that kind of just like stuck that you can kind of think about? Or
Oh yeah, absolutely. We've spoken a couple times, and he always reiterated to. He said, "Invest in brand," is what he said, and I don't know. I mean, that advice probably applies more now than it ever has because of social media, and back then the social media hadn't taken such a strong precedence as it does now, but I think he saw that coming. So his era was doing T-shirts, doing DVDs, right, doing those things. That was him investing in his brand, whereas now it's all social media based and just marketing yourself through there. So but yeah, that was the best advice he had given me, and I think I did that to a good amount. And in hindsight, it's golden, because what I learned through one of my sponsorships that took an ending with Allmax. I was with Allmax, I think, for 6 or 7 years, and I mean, up until the day I left there, I thought I was going to be there forever, really. And I realized that there's no such thing as family in bodybuilding. So had I not invested in myself and taken the time to build up my own brand, that would have been detrimental. So,
very cool. Very cool.
so
All right.
I would
So
definitely say that was the best advice that he had given me was.
perfect. Perfect. Love it. So at what age, Brandon, did you start lifting weights? And then why did you start lifting weights at that age?
I started lifting when I was in 8th grade. I was going out for football. Um, and so we would go across the street, we would go across the town to the high school and lift twice a week. And I just liked it. I loved lifting. I fell in love with it more so than any of the sports that I played. So my sophomore, junior, and senior year, I took weightlifting as a class, and just kind of as high school went on, I was like, I just like lifting more. So that was pretty much it. I mean, once I got out of high school, I competed at 19. That was my first show. So lifting took my love, man. It took over everything. More in sports.
Very cool. And we're going to get more into that. But before we do, just kind of share a little bit about your upbringing. Where did you grow up? Kind of paint that picture of your childhood up to about high school. You mentioned sports, so maybe just talk about that. Any influential people, parents, anything like that in your younger years, and then we'll move on from there.
Sure. Yeah, childhood was a little washy. I was a fat kid. It was not like it's not a glorious childhood. We'll leave it at that. Parents definitely were influential, but in a way that I was able to learn the things and do the things that I want to do by bad example. So they showed the things I made sure I didn't want to do in my life. So, but outside of that, I mean, getting into high school, I played soccer, played football, track. I was a big bowler, oddly enough, pretty successful at that. I was a mediocre athlete at best. I was nothing special. So pretty lame story, really. Nothing interesting there.
Okay. Was there a coach or a teacher, or was there some adult in those younger years that did have a positive influence on your life, or not really?
No, not really. I had a couple teachers that were, that were real supportive, real nice, or whatever, and I keep them. I remember them, but no, I mean, I was kind of a loner growing up. So once I got out of high school and I went off to school and started my life that way, and just have kind of grown on my own for the most part. And that's just, I've always been kind of that way.
Yeah. Well, it kind of fits pretty well for bodybuilding then. So you started lifting weights kind of in 8th grade for sports. And then you said you competed at 19. So why don't you talk about kind of getting into the whole bodybuilding world, if you don't mind?
Yeah. So I was actually right out of high school. I was waiting to go back to school for a little bit. And I was working at a restaurant, and one of the guys was like, "Oh, I want you to meet my friend D." He was a local cop, natural bodybuilder. And I had met with him, and he basically took me under his wing, and we started training for my first competition at 19. And so I won the teenage class. It was me and one other guy. I was 186 pounds, and my conditioning is probably about as good as it's ever been. Still needed work. And then I took second in the light heavyweight class in the open. From that point on, man, I mean, the rest is history. I fell in love with bodybuilding, and that was actually when I went to school for college. I, went for exercise science, and just have been a trainer basically my entire adult life, and that's been it since then.
Cool. So when did you So why don't you talk about like that first competition? Because there's gonna be a lot of people that have kind of like they're just getting into bodybuilding or they're thinking about competing. Was it kind of something that you really loved and kind of got hooked right away, or did it take a little time after that first competition?
Oh no, man, I was hooked. Yeah, I was hooked. You know, what was funny was I'd never been to a competition prior. I never watched one, and the team typically go on first. So I was the very first teen to go on at my show, and I just didn't know what the hell I was doing. But I did my first pose was a rear double bicep. I stepped out to one of Disturbed's songs, like walking out with the whole machine posing routine, just so cheesy, man. Just, you know. But no, it was then, man. It was right then. I was already waiting for my next show. I was like, I'm gonna get huge. Like I'm ready to go back and work out and get big, and like I can't wait to do another show. And I never looked back. And like I said, I mean that pursued me to go to exercise science and become training. And I've always loved helping people. So that was one thing that I noticed that when I was getting ready for that competition, people were asking me for advice, and I really enjoyed being able to give them that advice and seeing them, you know, do what it was with what I gave them and actually see results. So
You feel like just because we didn't touch on your childhood a whole lot, but do you feel like bodybuilding at that really young age kind of gave you a direction and kind of gave you an identity that maybe you didn't have when you were younger, or not per se?
oh yeah, oh no, absolutely, no. Bodybuilding has given me everything. It really has. The lessons that I okay, so my parents, they weren't strict on me. It was a free for all. It was a shit show. Didn't have structure. Didn't have um, discipline. I wasn't, you know, half-assing was encouraged. You know, quitting was fine. Don't do it. You don't want to be disappointed. Like the whole thing. Like I don't. I'm so polar opposite of that now, and I have bodybuilding and thank for that. I didn't have any of the qualities that I have now, I've gotten from bodybuilding. The discipline, just the grit, the perseverance, everything, being dedicated, learning to just mental acuity, everything. I mean, and I really do owe it to bodybuilding because I mean, obviously, you know this, right? Like bodybuilding takes so much mentally, and none of those things are anything that I ever got from my parents. And it's no discredit to them because themselves were not that way. So I can't expect that from them when they're not that way themselves. So it is what it is. But 100%, yeah, bodybuilding has made me who I am today. I wouldn't change it for the world.
Yeah. So why don't you talk a little bit more about your competition history then? When did you kind of get, was the NPC the first competition that you competed in? Did you get in the NPC right away, or was that a little ways down the road?
That was down the road. I was pretty fixed on being the natural Mr. Olympia for quite a while. The first show I did in 19 was the NGA Heart of America in Peoria. I don't think I did my first NPC show until I was like 24, I want to say, and I won the Mr. Indiana. I was a heavyweight, still natural. Um, yeah, so I mean, it was a while. It was probably about 4 years before I did my first NPC show.
Okay. So talk about then we'll kind of go over the drug-free bodybuilding or the natural bodybuilding, but talk about stepping into the NPC. What was that like for you? How was that kind of in terms of a transition?
I don't remember it being too much of a difference in transition. Honestly, yeah, I mean, I remember seeing a guy there were a couple guys that were like bigger than me and stuff like that. But I think when I was 24 when I did that show, and I was 216, in pretty good shape for that time. And I mean, so I don't know. I don't think I really. I think because I was still natural, I didn't really understand the difference between like the natural organizations and the NPC. I saw that show as Mr. Indiana, so that was why I did it, you know. But yeah, so I mean, it was an easy transition, and I didn't come out of that era, that I guess avenue of bodybuilding for another year and a half, 2 years. So I just continued to compete at the NPC naturally.
What was kind of like was it kind of like the forums? Was it magazines? How did you kind of get your bodybuilding information in terms of training, nutrition, and all of that? Because obviously, I think you and I are probably around the same age, so it was a lot different back then than it is now with the social media. How did you kind of get that information to progress your bodybuilding, Brandon?
Oh, it's this thing these kids, they don't know about these days, man, but it's these things called books. Real informative. Trial and error is really good. But again, I also went to school for exercise science, so that gave me a base. But trial and error was it for me. I mean, I was always very intuitive with my body and the way I would train. And I think I've always had in my head to train everything symmetrically and also just get a good connection and get a pump. So if I was doing a movement, I knew what it needed to target. But there was one book that I really recommend, Strength Training Anatomy. And for anybody that I guess really doesn't know a lot about training, that's a really helpful book because it gives all the exercises and color codes like the anatomy and the muscles that's activating. And so that was a great book, like early on, where I was able to look at it. And Arnold Schwarzenegger, Bible of Bodybuilding, right? We've all read it, multiple times probably. So yeah, those were basic books of info back then for me.
Cool. Now, did you have a coach in those earlier days, or did you kind of figure things out on your own and then get a coach later on? How did that kind of work?
Yeah, I did my own thing for a long time. And then it probably wasn't until I was like 25. Dave Palumbo was my first coach. Yeah, did the keto thing, that whole thing. And it was great. I learned a lot from him. And eventually I moved over. I found Thackeray Mubarak, eventually because I was sponsored by Allmax and he was kind of affiliated with Allmax a little bit before. And so, yeah, I've had several coaches over the years.
Okay. So some of the younger listeners, again, that are maybe just getting into bodybuilding, are you kind of in the camp of you think people should try to figure things out on their own right away and learn their own bodies? Or are you in the camp of like, hey, hire a coach, skip all the mistakes and just, get that coach and have them kind of help you along? Because there's kind of two different camps. Where are you at with that?
You know what? It's really hard to say. And I would say it's probably really dependent on the individual, right? I was one that took it upon myself and learned on my own. But again, I was also very intuitive with training. I was intuitive with how my body was working. And I would be afraid to say to hire a coach because you and I both know there's people that shouldn't be coaching. And I feel like if you're at a young age, I feel like I would recommend learning some things on your own, right? If you're going to research credible information. Don't go on forums because you don't know who the hell these people are. Read like textbook type stuff, right? Like that's important. If you are going to hire a coach, don't just be a mindless drone and do whatever it is that they're saying. Always ask questions. And that's something I preach to my clients. Don't ever be afraid to ask me why, right? Like or ask me like why we're doing something. I always explain anyway, but I always tell people like there's a difference between being questioned and asking questions. And I want my clients to learn because the more they know, the better they're going to do with the information that I give them. Right. So I would say that I would encourage you to do as much learning as you can on your own, obviously. But if you are going to hire a coach, make sure that you understand the why and everything that you do, whether it's why you're eating, where you're training, the way you're doing cardio, what if you're taking enhancements, anything, right? Always know the reason why. Everything should have a purpose in bodybuilding, at least in my opinion. So yeah, I would say that I'm not really in either camp, but I would say that both apply to different people.
Great advice. I appreciate that. So let's touch on training just for a minute. How has your training, Brandon, kind of evolved over time, if it has at all?
Yeah, it's definitely evolved. I'm 37. I'll be 38 in June. When I first started off, obviously, you've got rubber ligaments and joints and you're invincible. Knee wraps and elbow sleeves weren't even a thing. But my volume was much higher. Recovery rate was, exponential. So over time, I've trained heavier as I've gotten older, oddly enough. Volume is lower, but I always believed in blood volume. I was always what I call like a blood volume trainer, right? So high rep, very little rest, moderate to heavy weight. And I honestly feel like that's one of the reasons why I've been able to have like more of a rounder muscle belly look, over the years is because of that. But it's evolved in terms of, I used to train like instinctively. I didn't have a routine. I never did. I always trained I had certain movements that I thought that I needed to do because I needed to bring out certain body parts, but I wouldn't ever be a routine. So I would go in and just what I felt like training, that's what I would do. And I would just train as hard as I can. And that was it. But now, I'm a little bit more structured with my workouts. I am training heavier. My intensity is as high as it's ever been. So even, as long as I've been doing this, so it's, but I would say that I think training kind of goes with the times. So, if I'm having certain aches and pains, or if my recovery's off, or, like I just opened a gym last year, so my stress level is much higher. So I'm adapting with that as well. You know what I mean? But yeah, I would say that I've gone from more volume to less volume, with lighter weight to heavier weight. I think I've done it backwards.
Yeah, no. And that you kind of have, I've never heard that before, but what's the impetus for you to kind of make that transition? Because that is kind of backwards from everybody I've ever heard. Like what was that kind of like that spark to kind of get you to go to the lower volume, but the heavier weight from kind of the more high blood work stuff?
Well, honestly, because I've always said, like, I don't feel like I ever had like a really dense physique. Um, I felt like I lacked that hardness, and I definitely have that now. But maybe it was a muscle maturity thing. Maybe I'm a late bloomer. But I started telling myself I need to train a little bit heavier to try and gain that density. And I've always said, like, for my size, like, I'm not a strong guy. I'm not. Like, I might be strong in general, but for my size, my build, my weight, I'm not strong. Like James Hollingshead, strong. Ian, strong. Me, not so much. So, but I push heavy for me, just to clarify. But yeah, so I mean, I got into a habit of doing that, and my body became responsive. And that's another thing too, is I feel like your body doesn't always respond the way that it used to certain um, stimuluses. So that's one of the reasons why too, where I gave it a shot and training heavier, and I felt like my body was responsive, and I felt really good doing it. So I'm still doing like 12 and 15 reps, but the weight is still complete and utter failure at those 15 reps. So
Very cool. So are you kind of like, you have kind of like that top set then? Is that kind of like you got that one kind of set where it's like, I'm going all in here, and then are you done? Or do you kind of have like the back off sets? What does it kind of look like in terms of the nuts and bolts in an actual session?
I'll do like what you call like 3 top sets, 3 working sets. And then I'll do like a back off set depending on the movement. I don't do back off sets on all movements, because some movements I feel like they don't work well. Or sometimes I'll do like a cluster set at the end of a workout just to cash them out, or if I feel like I'm really taxed. So I mean, yeah, it's again like I have my bread and butter movements, but I'll rotate intensifiers from time to time. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So last question about training, and then we'll kind of get back into your competing. But so if somebody's would you recommend, like, kind of looking back now, would you kind of recommend to yourself or other people that are listening or watching this episode with you, Brandon, to maybe start with the heavier weights and then transition into kind of the higher volume stuff? Or do you think it's really just dependent upon the individual fully?
I would say neither. People need to focus more on technique and execution before they focus on weight. And this is what I preach constantly to this day to clients, to bodybuilders, is you can use all the weight in the world, but if you're swinging around using momentum, you're not making the muscle work. You're not, right? It's a pendulum, and that's not going to help you at all. It's not going to make the muscle work at all. So my advice to everybody always is focus on form and execution. Learn to engage the muscle the right way, because you're going to get stronger that way, and you're going to build bigger and stronger muscles that way, rather than, and lightweight isn't going to be good, because it's not enough of a stimulus to make the muscle get stimulated to grow or be torn down, right? So finding that moderate weight, but making sure that you learn to execute the right way, maintaining tension, making sure you're connected the whole time without breaking form to a degree where you lack control, I think is where people need to start with, more so than weight, because the weight will come once you execute well and do it consistently. The strength comes quicker, rather than jumping up 25, 45, 90 pounds on a movement and swinging it around like an asshole.
Perfect. Excellent. Okay. So I want to step back kind of into your competing. Was there ever a point where you kind of like wanted to become an IFBB Pro, or have you always kind of been the person just focused on the process and focused on, you know, just staying in your lane, bodybuilding and seeing whatever happens? Where's your mind been at with all that?
Well, I mean, I've been trying to be a pro for a long time. That's been the goal from the get-go. I just suck and I've just not been able to do it. Let's be real. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, man, I just love to train. I love bodybuilding. I don't necessarily love the competing aspect. I love prep. I love everything that comes along with it. But I will say this, that when I started like really seriously competing, like 24, 25, and I was in my head, I'm like, I want to be an IFBB Pro, right? I kind of got rid of the whole natural Mr. Olympia thing. You know, there was, from that point on to now, that goal has really diminished in terms of just how appealing it is to me. And I think a lot of that just has to do with being in the industry for a long time. A lot of that has to do with the way social media has taken over. Being a pro really doesn't have that. It doesn't have, I don't know. It's not the same as what it used to be, you know? And I'm older now too. I mean, and my priorities are different. And I realize that I've been able to do so much more with my life than just earn that status. People think I'm pro anyway, which I think is more annoying because I'm not. Just reminds me that I probably should be, and I haven't gotten there yet. But yeah, I mean, I've always wanted to be a pro, and you know, that's why like I'm going to be competing this July, because I feel like if I don't really like 100% give it my all one more time, or two more times possibly, then I'll probably regret it for the rest of my life, because I did spend so much time trying to attain that goal.
So in that pursuit of becoming an IFBB Pro and not yet attaining it, and you've been competing for a long time, and you're in your upper 30s, like, what has that taught you? Like, I mean, because we set goals, right, in life, and sometimes like, man, I'm going to get this goal right away, but sometimes life doesn't allow us to attain things when we want to attain them, because there's lessons that we need to learn. There's things that we need to go through. What is not getting your pro card yet at this point kind of taught you? What have you learned?
Taught me that there's a lot more to life than bodybuilding. Like I said, I opened up my own gym last year. It's the best thing that I've ever done in my life. You know, it's you know, outside the family, of course. But I mean, and I think if I would have really been focusing on bodybuilding, competing, that I wouldn't have done that. And so, yeah, I mean, I've never really had that luxury of just being a bodybuilder. And I mean, I did for a short time, and I actually hated it, being a paid bodybuilder, to just eat, sleep, and train. And I wanted to freaking shoot myself because I was bored out of my mind. But, but yeah, I mean, I've learned through multiple times, like, things that don't go our way, they're always for a reason. And a lot of times those reasons don't become apparent until after the math, like the after fact. So yeah, I mean, and like I love to train. That's what makes me happy. I love to train. That's my favorite part of the day. So I could honestly go without competing. And I think so I don't think it's really taught me a whole lot. It's just something I've kind of already known anyway, but bodybuilding is just another example of that. That's all.
Right. So, up to this point, what has kind of been a highlight for you in terms of competing? And then you mentioned you're going to be competing in July. So kind of talk about what your goal is this year with your competitions.
I don't have a whole lot of highlights. It's not like I've got a great career, like I said earlier, if you want to even call it that. I would say there's two shows that really stick out to me. There was the NPC Milo Sarchev Classic in 2017, 16, maybe, I think, in that range. I don't remember. But I won the overall. I had to qualify for nationals that year, 3 weeks prior. But my son was able to be there to watch me win. So that was a highlight. And then actually my 2019 nationals, where I took 6th, and while the placing isn't what I wanted, I would say it was the happiest I'd ever been going to a show. I prepped the entire year, found out I had thyroid issues, which is Hashimoto, pushed through a prep. It was grueling. And when I flew into Florida, I was just on cloud 9. I was just like because I wanted to compete. I hadn't done it for 3 years up to that point, and all I wanted to do was step on stage again. And I was ecstatic. I was so happy. I mean, people were like, "Why are you so happy?" I'm like, "Man, like I'm just happy to be here." And those 4 days prior to the show, my body was just changing like by the hour, because I was probably for the first time in my life like stress free completely. But I would say those are probably the two most memorable moments.
And then what's your plans in 2022 this year?
So I haven't competed since 2019, so I have to do the Wings of Strength in Tinley Park, Illinois. It's a qualifier, and then I plan to do the USA's the following week in Vegas.
And your plan is to get your IFBB Pro card at the USA's, right?
Yeah, that's my plan, and I plan on going to the Tampa Pro after. So.
Hey, all right, cool, man. I like it. I like it. So you've brought up your gym, which the name of it is Iron Rails Training Facility. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So just talk about that. I own a gym, and it's a lot of responsibility, but talk about, I believe you opened it up last year, you had mentioned. And so talk about that process. Talk about being a business owner. A lot of people think they want to own a gym, and then they own a gym, and then they realize maybe it's not what they thought it was going to be, because it's actually a business. You have to pay the bills, you have to make money. So just talk about a little bit of that process of opening a gym, being a business owner, and what that takes just from your perspective.
Sure. I mean, so I honestly, I mean, I used to want to open a gym when I was younger, and then I realized it's really not a lot of money in it, like people thought. And so I thought that was silly. But 2020 was actually what fueled me to do this. Like I said, I live in Northwest Indiana, a lot of commercial gyms in the area. Once 2020 hit, things were shut down from March to June. There were a lot of factors that year that, and it's weird because that year, you know, in January, I felt like I was lacking purpose in my life. I've always been a trainer. I just felt very empty in terms of, you know, that fulfillment. And I was kind of on the verge of like seeking something different, you know, different avenues. And 2020 hit, things were shut down. You know, we're in the house for 3 months, couldn't really train. I was able to go to the gym and train because I worked there, but if I'm being honest, I was only there a few days a week, and it didn't feel right being there at all. I hated it. So I lived like a normal human for 3 months, ate my ass off, had a great time, got fat. It was fun. Like when Luke Sandow passed away, you know, because of the lockdown, that was one thing. Going back to work, you know, and the whole mask thing and just everything just being so different, and just the way that was ran. I felt like there were a lot of things that made me say like, I could do this better, you know? So when I finally come to the realization, like this needs to happen, I swore, like, because back then we didn't know what was going on. I said, the doors will never close. And that was ultimately what I wanted, you know, because I saw myself too, like I deal with anxiety and depression a little bit, and it's difficult, you know, and there was a lot of other people that I knew that dealt with it, Luke being one of them. And so, like I said, it just felt like a responsibility and obligation to do so. So August of 2020, I was looking for buildings, found one. It was being framed. It was perfect. Big garage doors, just exactly what I wanted. Warehouse setting. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Committed to it on the spot, and it was supposed to open up in December. Obviously, construction like doesn't really work that way. So March 1st is when I opened the doors. Named it Iron Rails because the train being one of the most powerful engines, powerful automobiles that we have that's can pull a load that's always, you know, on one track to its destination, doesn't derail. Just, you know, signifying that, you know, the ways that we want to try and operate in our life, just always moving forward. And I wanted to make this place special. I want to give it some place for people in this area to go to where they could just train. You know, it's not, you know, different kind of equipment focusing on atmosphere. You know, you walk in the door, I have a plaque on the wall that talks about effort, you know, ringing the bell on your way out, because just, you know, being honest with yourself and just constantly getting better with in whatever capacity it is that you're here for. If it's mental health, if it's physical, if it's physique, if it's whatever it is, right? So this meant a lot to me, and it was a lot of work. March 1st was my first day that I opened up, and I don't think I hold on a second.
Oh, here you go.
Doing a podcast. What's up?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
We can wait then.
Okay. My plate.
Life of a business owner, right?
That's it, right? My phone's rang 3 times for a gym. I'm just like, go away.
We'll finish up here shortly.
Oh, you're good. You're good. He's working right now, so he's fine.
Okay.
He probably is wondering why I'm sitting out in the parking lot when I'm not supposed to be here. But yeah, so I just wanted to open up something different. You know, this is a limited membership base, 500 people. It's a passion project. I'm not taking money from the gym. I make my own living. So that was another thing where I wanted to protect the integrity of the gym and always constantly reinvest into the gym for the people. Basically everything that this place is not a money maker. It's doing very well, but I mean, you know, the electric and the gas is, you know, $1,700 a month. You have insurance. You have 9 pieces of equipment cost $38,000. I mean, people don't realize those things. Like you're spending $250 a month just on paper towels and toiletries for the bathrooms. Like, so yeah. So when people are like, "Oh, it must be fun to be a business owner," no, like taxes, fuck off. Like nothing about this is like grand, you know. But the paycheck for me is man, every single day I have people that thank me for opening this place. They really do. I have people that drive from hundreds of miles to come and try out the gym. But seeing these people every single day that I see here, and they're just thankful and they just love it here. And they tell me all the time, like, I had the worst day and I leave happy. And that's what I meant. That's what I made this place for. So I don't make a dime, but every day I feel like I'm getting paid here. It's my favorite place to be. I truly am like blessed and fortunate to have been able to be put in a position to open this place and provide a facility for people, you know, to come here and train. And it really is like a safe spot for them.
Love that. Now I went to the gym's Instagram and it said something about like unique pieces. So how did you kind of go about stocking the gym in terms of the equipment? Why don't you talk about that? Because I think it's probably a little bit different than the normal gyms a lot of people are going to nowadays.
Absolutely. Well, and again, everything that I'm doing is opposite of commercial gyms. You know, grabbing packages of Precore, Life Fitness, or Hammer Strength and putting it in a room and calling it a gym. Like I said, I've been a trainer for 20 years. Mechanics are my life. That's it. Like, so any machine that I've gotten is something that I've used before. And, you know, I've got Rogers, I have Atlantis, I have Paramount, I have Panada. I mean, I've got just nice brands that hit different, and a lot of Nautilus pieces, because Nautilus, one of my favorite lines, the way that they hit the muscle. So yeah, just unique pieces in which that they're unique probably to this area, but they're popular, you know, in the bodybuilding arena, I would say. So yeah, so they're all stuff that I've used before, or, you know, I know the brand well enough and I can see that the machine is effective.
What's the next piece that you've got your eyes on?
I'm actually getting ready to pick up about 5 pieces here in about a week. So yeah,
you sound like a legit bodybuilder gym owner right there, Brandon.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I got the most recent new piece that I bought was the Watson True Squat.
Cool.
Yeah, so I tell everybody, I said I bought that one for myself. I said you guys can use it though.
Very cool. What's I've asked a few other guys on the podcast that have their own gym. What's kind of like one of the newer brands or companies, you know, that you really have found their equipment to be really awesome?
I don't know if it's even newer, but I would say Panada is exceptional. I don't know if there's really any new. I mean, Arsenal, I have Arsenal Strength. I think Arsenal's probably the newest out of those guys. I think Panada's been around for a while. It's just Italy based. Atlantis has been around for a long time. I just don't think you see their equipment in the US quite a lot. But yeah, I would say Arsenal is probably the newest of them. I know Brad Holt really well. I mean, he does a great job with the equipment there. So yeah.
Cool. So we're going to wrap it up here in a few minutes. I want to ask you a few more things. One more question about business. As you've opened up this gym, you are a business owner, entrepreneur. Outside of the bodybuilding lessons that you've learned through competing, through bodybuilding, through training, what's kind of like this last year of being a business owner kind of taught you? Is there a new lesson or two that you can share with us?
Oh yeah. So many lessons. I would say that I kind of goes back to, I guess you could say it's relevant to the everything happens for a reason. So quick story was when I said the gym was actually supposed to open the beginning of December 2020, ended up not opening up until March, right? I had bought about 25 pieces of equipment, and then I think I bought 14 pieces from Arsenal Strength. So Arsenal said, all right, yeah, the equipment will be in like the end of December. Well, it didn't end up coming until the end of March, right? Dumbbells were supposed to be in like the middle of January. They didn't come in until like the second week of March. So I'm freaking out because I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm going to have a gym. I'm going to have rent to pay. Nobody's going to want to sign up at this place. Like I did a pre-sale of 100 people that sold out like within the first week, right? Which was awesome. But obviously like that's not necessarily enough to pay the rent for the first month. So what ended up happening was, because construction was delayed so often, I'd have to pay rent, but the equipment didn't come until March. So that, I would say, like that was when I realized, like, and that has happened, man, on so many occasions where something was supposed to happen or someone was supposed to arrive when it was supposed to, and it ended up working out so much better than it didn't. So now when things happen, I have a little bit of a different perspective, a little bit different attitude toward things. And I would say that I've applied that to things outside the gym, outside of bodybuilding as well, where I'm like, okay, like it doesn't mean that that was the only avenue that was supposed to happen with. So, and a lot of times things do end up working out better because they didn't happen the way that I needed them to.
Perfect. All right. So you mentioned just a couple minutes ago, just that you struggle at times with some anxiety and depression. And if you don't really want to get into that, that's fine. But I do want to ask you, because this is kind of like the impetus with this podcast, right? Is getting behind the muscle. We see everything on social media, Instagram, and everybody thinks that you guys, IFBB pros, whatever, like all of our lives are perfect. And that's the farthest thing from the truth, right? We all have issues. We all have struggles. So with the depression, anxiety, I'll kind of ask you it this way. How have you been able to kind of work through some of that when maybe you are in some of your darkest times?
You know, it's not something I've always dealt with. I know a lot of people have. At least not that I'm aware of. I think it was 2016 was where the depression actually hit me, and I had no idea what was going on, which is kind of scary. I just competed the North Americans, and this was probably like a month and a half maybe after, and I was working and stuff like that, and I was getting paid by Allmax a nice salary, so I wasn't training clients as much, so I was constantly canceling them. I wasn't working much because I just, for whatever reason, all I knew was pain, and I don't know how to explain that, and I don't know that people would understand it because I hadn't experienced it. I know I wouldn't if I hadn't gone through it, but I would literally, there would be days where I'd be on the floor crying, and I didn't know why. And it was weird because at the time I didn't even question why. That's all I felt, which was weird. I'll never forget, it was the weekend of Halloween that year. I was driving to the cleaners to pick up my son's hockey jersey because he was going to be a Blackhawks player for Halloween. I was getting ready to pull out, and I wasn't paying attention. I almost got hit. I almost got T-boned, right? And it didn't even startle me, but I remember thinking I was disappointed, right? So that at that moment was when I realized like something's not right, because that's not me. I'm not that type of a person. And I realized right away. And so I went and got help. So I was doing therapy for months, and it's the best thing that I ever did, because what I ended up learning was the why, right? A lot of those things stem from a much younger age. When you're more aware of things, you have a better understanding. You can handle them and think yourself through them a lot easier. So that was probably the best thing that I've ever done, was, addressing that, head forward like that. And so now I think, like I have like dips here and there, but nothing ever like that. And I truly think it's because of that. I think I'm able to recognize now, and I'll supplement. I never want to take a medication, but I'll supplement like nootropics and vitamin D and things like that. And I guess having an awareness of it, I think really goes a long way. So if I had answered that question, I would say it's that, have gone and talked to somebody to understand why, and using some natural supplements to try and help elevate my mood and, nootropics and things like that.
Very cool. I appreciate you touching on that, Brandon. So the last question I want to ask you, and then I'll kind of give you the final words, so to speak. But I think it was like your second or third Instagram post here just recently from your last one, and you talked about acknowledging progress. Will you kind of just share a little bit more of that insight with all of us, please, and what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I'm 37, so I've been competing for a long, long time. And bodybuilding, obviously, right? It's instant gratification. We want to get big. We want to be huge now, like yesterday. And unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. But the whole cliche, trust the process, obviously it's true. But I remember when I was much younger, I would train, and I was doing everything I needed to do, training hard. I was eating right. I was taking my supplements. Like, I just ate, slept, and lived bodybuilding. Like, that was it, and the progress was just never enough. And I was constantly like, just discouraged, right? And the thing is it doesn't make any sense, because we all know that the gains that we want don't come that quickly. We all know that. No matter what avenue you take, they don't happen that quickly. Like, we all do a few sets, pose, we do a few sets, we post some more. Nothing's changed there. Right? We're taking weekly projects, progress pictures. Nothing's changed there. Maybe we're a little leaner, maybe we're a little fatter, one of the two, right? But the muscle is not going to be noticeable. And so I was constantly frustrated. And then I noticed over time, like, I was always irritated. I was always in like this negative mindset, like, God, like, it's just, I'm not progressing. But I knew I was progressing, and I acknowledged, I'm like, it's just not enough. Right? And so when you rationalize, like, muscle doesn't grow that. If I'm able to see progress, right, no matter how little, I'm moving forward, and that's a win, right? Because now if I'm seeing subtle progress, I'm going to multiply that times X amount of months. And what's that going to look like? That makes sense?
100%.
And so that's why I try to tell these guys. And one of the reasons why I preach to these younger guys too, because, speaking on terms of using, enhancements, these kids, just you guys who are younger, stay away from that shit. If you're in your teens and early 20s, like, you guys need to hold off on that, because you have more hormones coming out of your body than you can afford to put in there. Okay. For starters. But, like, things come quickly, or things don't come quickly, no matter what avenue that you take, period. Right? It's a big misconception. Muscle does not grow at an exponential rate. We have a few people here and there, like Nick Walker blew up, right? But that guy is an animal. That guy trains harder than everybody, and he is so meticulous on his food. And he's also a genetic freak, right? Like, looking at him in high school, he was meant to be a very big man, and he is, right? Those guys are few and far in between. So when you get these people who are looking at things like that, and it's not Nick's fault, right, that he's incredible, but it's just an example, right? Like, we all look at him, we're like, what the fuck? Like, what's he doing? Like, but nobody's willing to do what Nick does, right? You know what I'm saying? It has nothing to do with that. Look at the effort. Look at the meticulousness. Look at how concise he is with his training. He doesn't train like an asshole. His execution's perfect. His diet's perfect. He's like the epitome of what bodybuilding is, in terms of, like, just dedication and commitment, right? He just happens to be a genetic anomaly, right? But you have people that, like, kids that look to him, and they're like, well, what the fuck? Well, it must be this. No, it's not that. It's the last thing. So, hard, focus on learning your diet, be consistent, and you can't rush this kind of thing. And so that's why I want to tell these guys, like, if you're seeing changes, acknowledge it, and be like, now I'm doing the right thing. Don't sit there and try and find shortcuts to rush forward.
Perfect. All right, Brandon, we're gonna end it there, my man. If you have any final thoughts or any final words, go ahead and share those. If you don't, why don't you just let us know where we can connect with you on social media, any sponsorships, anything else that you kind of want to share, and then I'll do the outro, and that'll be a wrap.
Sure, man. Yeah, it's if you guys, I'm a Big B _ super heavy at on Instagram. Yeah. I think that's my only social media. I'm old. I'm a athlete of HD Muscle and Iron Rebel. I think that's it. Yeah, I'm old. So that's pretty much it, man. I'm not a very interesting dude.
That's cool. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see my shirt or not?
Oh, I saw the top of it.
Yeah, I got the Iron
Iron
Rebel
Rebel.
on, man. I love their clothing, and they're an awesome brand. So Brandon, thank you so much for coming on, man, and sharing a little bit of your story. Okay.
I appreciate you having me, man. Thank you so much.
For sure. All of you who are tuning into another episode of Behind the Muscle podcast, just quickly here, thank you so much. I appreciate you. If you haven't hit that subscribe button on YouTube yet, make sure you do that. Take this episode with Brandon, share it on your Instagram stories, tag Brandon, tag Behind the Muscle so that we know you listened specifically to this episode and found great value in it. And then finally, I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.